All right, everybody, here we go. 28b5. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, others say it's not Rabbi Yochanan, it's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav, but okay. This is something we've been talking about the whole time. Those who come to console the mourner, the Nicham Avelim, are not allowed to start talking until the one who's mourning, the Avel, begins to talk first. Shenemar, because it says Legabe Iyoi, Job, which is where we learn a lot of the halachas of Avelos. It says like him, his friends came and they sat with him on the ground for 7 days. And nobody said a word. Everything was silent until Iyoi opened up his mouth. Vahadar, and then right after that it says Vayan Alipas Hatimani, and then his friend Alipas Hatimani spoke up. So what do you see? That nobody spoke until Iyoi was ready to speak. When Iyoi spoke, then the ones who came to console are allowed to speak, and that is the halacha today. If you come into a mourner's house and he's so broken and he doesn't say a word, you're not supposed to say a word. It means there are no words. You don't have words right now to give. Okay? What he wants is merely your presence is there. That's enough. Amar Rabavu, minayin la'odol shemeisi b'rosh. How do we know that the mourner sits at the head? If you ever think about it, right? We, the consolers, face the mourner, right? Because Shenema, because it says again by Iyoi, Ivcha darkam be'eshev roish ve'eshkan kemelach bagud bagidud asher be'avelim yenachid. Iyoi talking about glory days pass me by. Iyoi was talking about the good old days. He would say, I would choose this their way. I would sit at the head. I would rest like a king among his troops as one who consoles mourners. So the Gemara asks right away, that doesn't tell me that the mourner sits at the head. That tells me actually that those who come to console sit at the head. It means Yinache means those who come to console. They sit at the head. But it's spelled Yinochem, Ksiv. He who will be comforted. And that's the way you're supposed to translate the word. The one who will be comforted should sit at the head. Mazutra says you learn this halacha from here. V'sar mizrach siruchim. Excessive mourning will approach. Meaning, mirzach nasis sar l'siruchim. The mourner becomes the prince of the exalted ones, the ones who are doing the mitzvah of consoling, Nicham Avelim, coming to console the mourner. Amar Rav Chama bar Chanina, minayin lechosin shemeisa b'roish. How do we know that a chosin, a bridegroom, sits at the head like a king? Shenema kechoson yechayim per, like a bridegroom who is splendid like a kohen. Ma kohen b'roish, just like the kohen sits at the head. Av chosin b'roish, so the kohen sits at the head. The kohen gufim inolon. How do I know that a kohen gets to sit at the head? The Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. The pasuk says, "Viki dashtoi," you shall sanctify him, and he shall be holy to you. L'chol davar shebekadusha, for every matter of sanctity. Litzrach rishon, to read first from the Torah, the kohen gets the first aliyah. Levarech rishon, to bless first. He's the one. If there's a kohen in the room, he gets to do the zimun. And he takes the preferred portion first. If you're separating out food for a kohen, a Levi, and a Yisrael, you separate it out equally, and then the kohen is the first one to choose which portion he wants. Just as an aside, how far does this rule of Viki Dashta, you shall make him holy, apply to the rest of us, the Leviim and Yisraelim, vis-a-vis the kohen? Either you can learn this Gemara one way, that only in Devarim Shebekadusha, only things that are holy stuff, like aliyos and benching, etc., That's where you put the kohen first. But in regular mundane life, you do not. He's like everybody else. Or there's another way to look at this. V'kidashta v'yehei kodesh, you shall sanctify him and it shall be holy to you. That the kohen to us, the Levim Yisraelim, is intrinsically sanctified, so that he always gets first, regardless of what the situation is. So if you're at a kiddush after davening, the kohen gets to go first. He doesn't have to wait in line to get the food, for an example. That's a machlokes. How far do you take? It's an argument in how far you take this mitzvah of kiddashta. Does it only go in the sanctified things, or no, the kohen himself vis-a-vis us is sanctified, and therefore whatever's going on with him, he always gets first. Anyways, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Kosher Yitzias Neshama Min Haguf, the departure of the soul from the body is as hard. And now we're on Chavtes Amid Aleph and going to the end of the Kitzipore B'fi Habeshet, as a knotted rope pulled through a hole. The Rashi explains these are ship knots, sailor knots that are knotted up, and now when you have to untie, you got to pull it through, and you can imagine the amount of stress, exerting force that has to be applied, and that is very painful. Rabbi Yochanan,
I don't know if the Gemara here is talking about whether it's painful or not. I think the purpose of the Gemara is to show how difficult it is for the soul to depart the body upon death. Because the soul, but after that, the soul remains near the body because it lived with it the whole time. It's very difficult, and I think that's what the Gemara means to say. It's like a knot that you have to pull through.
It's very.
We spoke about whether it's painful to die or not, right?
Right. So I think
this is talking about how difficult it is for the soul to separate from the body.
So I think that could very well be the case. Rashi seems to simply be talking about the separation process without going into it. Chevel, like a rope, sheyesh by keshet, that has a knot.
Mention pain or anything
like you have to pull it through.
I mean, that's my shot.
No, but I think there is something to this. The more a person is grounded in this world, the more materialistic a person is in this world, the harder it is for the soul to leave the guf. That's what they say. In other words, if you work on your spirituality, then really all you're doing is going from one set of living to another set of living. Death is only a door.
If you're a tzaddik in your life, you're a righteous person, the soul doesn't want to separate from you.
Right, but even there,
the soul forgot how it was before.
Right.
Before
no question about it. But again, it's a much more metaphysical idea, because on the one hand, those who are great said it's like pulling a hair out of milk, like nothing. Here we're talking about the regular person. Okay, Kitzipoire. Let's just keep going over here. But Daddy, you're not look at Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan Kipiri Bipi Veshet. It's like a cable through a hole. So here, a cable through a hole theoretically doesn't have knots. That can go much easier. That's the cable that's connecting two ships. You pass it through the hole. It just goes.
The cable are tied together. They want to untie.
Right, but you untie it.
That's again a separation.
Right, but if you think of a sailor's knot with a lot of knots in it, right? Or I'll give you the better case. You're not allowed to untie knots on Shabbos. You ever notice what happens to your shoelaces on Shabbos? They always get full of knots.
That's not
No, no,
called.
I understand that, but you're trying not to untie when they double knot themselves. It's a pain in the neck. The point here is, there's two planes of existence. Here in the physical world, and then we're moving on to the spiritual world. And even that is not 100% so, because if Gan Eden and Gehenna are actual places, as is the simple meaning of it, in that case, they're creations. If they're creations, they're part of the physical world. They're part of the universe. So somewhere in the universe is Gehenna, and somewhere in the universe is Gan Eden. And we've had Gemaras where smoke comes out of the ground, and the Tanoim and Amoraim said that's the opening to Gehenna. So we don't really understand any of this. And we know that the sons of Kairach fell in the Chai Shoila. They fell into Shoila, into the depths, right? Again, we don't know what any of this truly means. Okay, we don't know what it truly means.
All right.
As Daddy, as you once pointed out, what is maybe the hardest thing, if upstairs is a base to Medrash and they're sitting and learning Gemara, and you never learned Gemara your entire life, that's a Gehenna. Sitting there the whole time and not understanding one word, that's very difficult.
That's right.
So who knows? Who knows? Bottom line is, none of us should know. Hashem should make it easy. We should all make tshuva, and it should all go well.
When the notes they do, Yitzhak, I was just in the notes they do differentiate between the righteous and the rest of us.
And then the rest of us, except what is the definition of righteous and what is the definition of the rest of us? I don't know the answer to that question.
That's a good point.
Because a person could be evil his entire life. But we learned on yesterday's Gemara, you can do one great deed and you're lauded for it. The Gemara says, and with this we're going to move on. The Gemara says, but the Gemara says this, and this is always to me the thing. It pays for an entire palace to be built, an entire huge edifice to be built, so that 200 years later, a righteous person will pass by and will have momentary pleasure from the shade of the outside wall of the palace. Let's understand that. It's paid for an entire palace to be built and 200 years to pass, so that somewhere in the future a righteous person will pass by and have pleasure for a minute or two from the shade of the side of that wall. So we don't understand the scope and the ripples of every one of our actions. And who does it affect? Whether it affects immediately or our immediate family, or the ripples will affect 3, 4, 5 generations down the line. It's just the way. Jeff, talk about ripples. Okay? Jeff, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so think about Brad. Okay, for an example, right? You guys grew up in San Francisco, but if Brad hadn't done what he did, and you hadn't decided to move from San Francisco to Boca Raton, just using you as an example, would we be sitting here this morning having this very intense conversation?
No, not even the thought of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So who understands, which means that you will now have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, God willing. Okay? And great-great-grandchildren who will be doing what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that your great-great-grandfather back there is Shepi Nachas and saying, you see, it all comes around in one big circle. Think about that, however. How do you get from point A to point B? It is I can't even begin to explain the ripples of life and what that effect is for generations to come. And because you are one of those ripples, your reward, etc., is affected by what's going to happen now over the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations to go.
Mhm.
That's the way it works. We can't even comprehend this. But that's the justice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't just look at the moment. There's the moment, and then there's the effect of those moments. Writ large, writ throughout the history of man. Or in other words, as the great Kutzke said, where do you find God? Wherever you let him in. That is maybe the greatest line I've ever heard in explaining that. Or as Rabbi Sachs says, you know what our job is? Our job is to bring God into this world. We reach up and we pull him down into this world. And how do we do that? Because we let him in. When he knocks on the door, we let him in. And that's really what it is. But how we let him in? So who knows who's righteous and who's not? In any given day, we do things that are righteous and we do things, unfortunately, that are not righteous, right? Because we're human, right? And the Yetzer Hara is a lot bigger. The evil inclination is a lot worse than we even realize, and insidious, okay? But we do our best, and we put one foot in front of the other, and we rely that Hashem Yisparach might be the boss, but first he's our father. And it's good to know the king. And it's good when the king is your father too. All right? There you go. So let's finish up. And says Rabbi Levi Bar Chayosa, Hanifta min ames, one who departs from a dead person, meaning he goes, Lo yoma, when you say to the dead person as you're walking away, Lo yoma lo lech lishalom, go to peace. Ela amalach lech bishal, go in peace. Because a dead person can no longer grow. He's in peace. He can't go to peace. Hanifta min achai, when somebody leaves a living person, lo yoma lo lech bishalom, ela lech lishalom, go to peace, grow. Go and become peaceful. Hanifta min ames, lo yoma lo lech lishalom, do not say go to peace, ela lech bishalom, go in peace. Shenema, in regarding the prophecy regarding the Petira of Avraham Avinu, Va'ata tovai el avisecha bishalom, and you shall come to your ancestors in peace. Hanifta min achai, lo yamalach lech bishalom, go in peace, and lech lishon, go to peace. Sharei David shamal Avshalom lech bishalom. David told Avshalom when he wanted to go to Hebron, David didn't know that Avshalom was going to go and rebel against him. So, but he told him, Lech Bishon, go in peace. That means that's it. Holach v'nisla, and he went and ultimately got hanged when he was being chased during his rebellion. Avshalom had long hair, it was like a nazir, and his hair got caught in the branches, and his mule kept running away, and unfortunately he hung by his own hair. Yisrael Shamal Moshe. Yisrael told Moshe when Moshe asked permission to go down to Mitzrayim to check on his brethren, even though Hashem had already, by the way, we learned from there, even though Hashem told Moshe go to Mitzrayim, nonetheless, the proper thing to do is nonetheless, you go tell you the person that you're staying by, may I go? That is still the proper way to talk.
Because when he got married, one of the things is that he should not leave Midian.
That's why. Right, leave Yocheved.
That's why he had to go and ask permission.
That's right. Yisrael Shamal Moshe Lech Lishalom. When Yisrael said to Moshe, go to peace. Holach v'Yitzliach. He went, and of course Moshe Rabbeinu was Matzliach. Amar Rabbi Levi, Kol HaYotzim Mibeis HaKnesses LeBeis Medrash. One who goes straight from davening to the learning. So, in other words, you daven Shachris and then you go learn. Or Mibeis Medrash LeBeis HaKnesses, or from learning to daven. Zaychu Mekabel Pnei of Shchina, who be Zaychu to greet the face of the divine. Shnema Yelchu Mechayil El Chayil Yireh Yeroeh El Elokim B'Tzion. They should go from multitude to multitude. Each appears before Hashem in Zion. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, says Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, and now we finish the Masechta 29a2. Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha afilu li'olam haba. Torah scholars have no rest even in the world to come because they're sitting and learning even up there. And when you sit and learn, as you can see from our daf Yomi over here, it is amazing what topics come up and how you what do you call we learn. Shenema yelchu mechayil el chayil. They go from multitude to multitude. Yeroel elikim b'tzion. They will appear before Hashem in Zion. The multitudes who study Torah before the divine in the Olam Haba. So even there, they do not cease to engage in this the mechemes HaTorah in the war of Torah of talking. Hadan Allah ve'enu megalchim esukelo mesechtes Moed Kattan. Hadan Allah elu megalchim esukelo mesechtes Moed Kattan. Hadan Allah elu megalchim esukelo mesechtes Moed Kattan. We should return to you ve'elu megalchim, and we now and the tractate Moed Kattan is concluded. Now we do.